How you doing, Facebook Live? Martin Lopez from the Curiosity Theory. Today is day 27 of my 31-day GST challenge. So today is also my 50th broadcast here on Facebook Live, so that's pretty exciting. My book is called The Curiosity Theory. Unfortunately, when you record, the words are backwards, but you can get an idea what it looks like. The Curiosity Theory, it's a book that I wrote this year in 2016. And what I decided to do is this year, well, actually for the month of December, I took on a challenge and I'm doing 31 days of videos around something that I'm passionate about, which is curiosity, and which is the path from conflict to resolution. And today we are talking about the biology of curiosity. So what is the biology of curiosity and how does that work? Well, let's talk about how the brain works, and that's where we'll talk about the biology. So first off, there's three different parts of the brain. There is which we talked about, there's the reptilian brain, which you have your fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. That's an automatic part of your brain. You have the limbic part of your brain, which is where you find happiness, sadness, and curiosity. And then you'll have the neocortex, which is the top part, which is actually the biggest part of your brain. And that's where we have our higher thinking. That's where we have self-awareness, consciousness, self-actualization, and all those things live there. So when we're talking about biology of the brain, let's talk about how we have emotions and what is the biology that is built around the emotions and how it affects the emotions. So let's start with the reptilian brain. So the reptilian brain, what happens in the brain is that when we see something, we sense danger or conflict, then we want to either fight our way out of it, that we either freeze and hoping nothing happens, or we want to run away. That's the mechanism of that. And so what we do is energetically in the body, the blood, all the energy of the body goes to the reptilian brain, and then what happens is all the other senses. So we're not really thinking about smell, sight, hearing, all those things, because basically we're either trying to fight our way out of it, adrenaline pumps, or just get the heck out of there, or just hope that nothing happens. That's the first part. So that is the reptilian brain, where we have fight, flight, or freeze. The limbic brain is where we experience our emotions and we ask questions. So we experience happiness and sadness. When we look at our feelings list, the feelings list that I use in my program, it's where, and I'll just go over some of the feelings. So feelings that are present when our needs are satisfied. So we experience confidence, we experience pride, concern, excitement, eagerness, hopefulness, we get moved, we experience gratitude, peace, and those kinds of things, as well as we experience curiosity. Other feelings that we experience that are negative, or rather feelings present when our needs are not satisfied, are we feel annoyed, we feel apprehensive, angry, disconnected, bored, agitated, pain, hurt, sadness, discouragement. Those are the emotions that we feel. And then so then what happens is, depending on where we're at, let's say we're feeling sad and then we get scared, then all of our energy goes from the emotion to the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, and then the trigger of the danger gets triggered immediately. We're not worried about if we're sad, we're not thinking about if we're discouraged or bored, we're just trying to fight our way out of it. So the neocortex, which is the higher reasoning center, where we experience higher thinking, self-awareness, consciousness, is triggered when we're dealing with conflict. The way you trigger it is you trigger it with questions and being curious. So a question is just a question. So if I ask you a question, what's 1 + 1 not equals 2? What comes after A, B, and then what? C, of course, right? So those are questions, but they don't really require a lot of thinking. That's just memorization. So asking a question doesn't necessarily take us to our neocortex. We will look there, but it's not going to investigate or change the energy much. What I'm saying is, in the curiosity theory, is when you're curious, when you actually engage curiosity and you're actually asking a question, let's say you're going through a conflict, what we do is take a second, take a breath, ask yourself a question, whatever that question is, and you're going to add curiosity to the mix. And what happens is it's going to change the emotion and then send a signal to your neocortex. So your neocortex tries to figure out what's going on, because your neocortex wants to come up with the answer, wants to help you out. When you ask a question to your brain, when you're curious, the brain is like a vacuum. It's got to figure out the answer. So the whole idea behind the biology of curiosity is being curious. That kicks in the higher reasoning. That takes us out of our emotions. Doesn't mean you don't experience the emotions, but what we want to do is you want to work through the emotions to see what that emotion is triggering. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're going through a situation. I'm just going to pick an emotion. I'm going to pick enthusiastic. So actually, let's pick a negative emotion. Let's say you're going through something, and I'm just going to point to one, and you're disturbed. So the emotion of disturbed. And let's say you ask yourself, so why am I disturbed? Why am I feeling disturbed? I'm just going to point to something on the needs list. I am disturbed because my need for meaning is not being met. So I have a need for meaning, for what's going on with me in this situation. It doesn't seem to be meaning anything. It doesn't seem to be giving me any kind of recognition or achievement. So my need for a meaning. So I don't do things that are just meaningless. So that's how a person that would be dealing with that that feeling and that need. So what happens? What happens when that need for meaning, that when we're feeling disturbed and that need for meaning is not met? And then what happens is that we fall into that fight or flight mentality, which is we're going to try to fight our way out. Like, how do I get out of this thing? Or let me run and get the heck out of here, or let me just stop and be frozen until maybe something changes. And what that has to do with safety, and that has to do with survival. So we have no meaning, therefore it's not safe, therefore, what's the use? So that's what happens. And so what literally happens in our body is a biological change where our energy in our brain flows from one region to the other, one of our three brains. And what we do is then we react. So in order to have different reactions, we want to ask questions. We want to be curious. And that causes us to think. It causes us to pause. It causes us to shut off the energy that's going to the reptilian brain, because we're fighting. Maybe we're fighting an argument, and we're maybe being judgmental. We're saying things that aren't very nice. Then we say, you may ask yourself a question. As you ask yourself a question, you're going to try to answer the question, so you're not necessarily talking at the same time. So it shuts down that fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. The emotions that you were experiencing in the limbic brain are no longer being experienced at that level, because all the energy is going to try to figure out what's going on. So the awareness part of curiosity is very important. Having self-awareness, which is the ability to engage in the direction that you want to engage in. How do I want to handle this situation? How do I want to handle this conflict? Knowing that it's not just all psychological, that it's also physiological. And what I think the benefit of having the physiological part or aspect of conflict, why that's so important, is because you're not always having to just figure it out. It doesn't have to be because of an emotion, or because maybe I'm feeling a particular way or something like that. It's not all purely emotional intelligence. It's physiological intelligence as well. So it's that combination. So a lot of people say it's emotional intelligence, which it includes emotional intelligence, but also how the brain works and how it engages in the different parts of the brain. So I hope this clears up a little bit about the biology of curiosity. Once again, my name is Martin Lopez. Today's day 27, and that concludes chapter 3 of the curiosity theory. So it's the 27th, and I barely got done with chapter 3. So we'll talk about feelings and needs. Even though we keep talking about it, what I want to do is every time we talk about it is to take a deeper cut, take a deeper slice, because ultimately the goal is to have the emotional intelligence to be able to identify what feelings you're experiencing, and then by being curious, then you're checking in with your higher reasoning center, your limbic. I mean your what is the brain called? I just forget of it. Sometimes I just get exhausted. The neocortex, and then you're engaging the neocortex into what need do I have that's either being met, where my feelings are positive, or not being met, where those feelings are negative. So if you have feelings that are being met, typically typically, I mean, if you have needs that are being met, typically you're going to have, or almost always, 100% of the time, is you're going to have emotions or feelings that are positive. If your needs are not being met, then the gauge of that is because you're not feeling positive, that you are having a disconnect. And then what we're going to do is we're going to dive into that. I'm going to tell you a little story about my wife and myself and our relationship, and how we distinguished meeting our needs, our mutual needs, together by going camping. So thank you very much for hanging out with me today on day 27 of the Curiosity Theory. My name is Martin Lopez, and I love you, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye. How can I turn this thing off?